My aunt stood in our kitchen with the family cruise folder in her hand, smiled at me, and said I had never really been their real family, only the one they'd raised. 12 years in that house, 200 Sunday dinners I cooked, one name missing from a cabin list. You understand? Denise Sorrell said. It's really about blood. Derek got a balcony suite. Gary got the room next to it. My name got a line through it in blue ink. I set my coffee down. I didn't argue. I said, okay. That night, I booked my own cabin, alone. 4 decks below theirs, on a different ship, out of Charleston, 3 weeks out. 3 days into that cruise, a purser knocked on my door with an envelope from a lawyer representing a dead man's estate, and when I opened it, the first line took the floor out from under me. Let me back up. My name is Colleen Marsh. I'm 30 years old. I didn't scream in that kitchen, and I didn't beg to be added back to the list. I've never been a person who raises her voice. I raised the file instead. That's not a saying I picked up somewhere. It's just what I do for a living. I'm a claims investigator for an insurance company out of Charlotte, and I spend my days reading numbers other people hope nobody reads closely. Denise knew that about me. She still handed me that folder like I wouldn't notice anything was missing. The kitchen was the same one I'd eaten breakfast in since I was 18, on Innes Street in Salisbury, the house with the crooked porch step nobody ever fixed. Denise had the folder open on the counter, laminated itinerary and all, like a woman showing off a new car. Balcony suite for Derek. Interior room for her and Gary. A day pass for the Callaways who were joining them in Nassau. No line for me, not even a cot. We just didn't think you'd want to be crammed in with everybody, she said. You like your space. That was Denise's gift. She could hand you a wound and call it a courtesy. I'd caught a fraud that morning before I even finished my coffee. A contractor filed a claim for water damage in a kitchen that hadn't flooded in 4 years, padded the repair estimate by $6,000, and thought nobody would check the permit history. I checked it in 11 minutes. I'm good at my job because I don't let anybody's version of a story stand in for the paperwork. I should have checked the cruise folder the same way. I didn't need to. I already knew what wasn't in it. Where's my cabin? I said. Not a question. I already knew the answer. Denise didn't even look up from the folder. Sweetheart, you were never really our real family, just the one we raised. Gary was at the table reading the sports section like she'd said something about the weather. Derek was on his phone in the doorway, thumbs going, not even glancing up. I want to tell you I had some clever line ready. I didn't. I picked up my coffee and I said okay, and I walked out to my car and sat there for a minute before I started it. Here's the thing nobody in that kitchen knew. 5 weeks earlier, my grandfather, Earl Prentice, had called me on a Tuesday night, his voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. There's something coming for your birthday, he said. Don't let anybody talk you out of opening it. I asked him what he meant. He just laughed, that same dry laugh he always had, and said an old man's allowed his secrets. 3 days later, he was gone. Heart in his sleep, at the lake house on High Rock. Nobody blamed anybody. He was 81, and it was simply his time. I hadn't thought much about that call since the funeral. Grief does that. It buries the strange little things under everything louder. But sitting in my car outside the house that raised me, watching Denise's silhouette move behind the kitchen window like nothing had happened, I thought about it again. Don't let anybody talk you out of opening it. I didn't know yet what it was. I just knew I wasn't going to let anybody near it. That's the other thing about me. I keep a fireproof box in my closet, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $60, and it's full of every disbursement letter the county and the trust office ever mailed me over the years, going back to when I was 18. I never had a reason to keep them beyond habit. My mother died when I was 6. My father wasn't in the picture past that. Earl was the one who set up money for my schooling and never once mentioned it at dinner. I filed every letter about it because that's what you do with paper that matters. even when you don't know yet that it matters. I went home that night, opened that box, and looked through 6 years of statements I hadn't touched since I filed them. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just wanted something solid in my hands. I booked the cruise 2 hours later. Different ship, different week, same ocean. I picked an interior cabin on deck 6 because it was the cheapest one available, $410 for 4 nights, and I didn't need a window. I wasn't going for the view. I told exactly nobody in my family. I didn't need to explain myself to people who couldn't be bothered to put my name on a list. The morning I left for Charleston, my phone buzzed with a photo. Denise had posted it to the family group chat, the one I was still somehow on. All 3 of them on the Lido deck, drinks in hand, captioned "Family Time," with 2 exclamation points, like punctuation could make it true. I didn't answer. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and drove 4 hours to a port that smelled like diesel and salt water, and I checked myself into a cabin nobody had crossed off a list. Before I left, I did one more thing. I called Marjorie Ashcroft, my grandfather's attorney, just to ask a routine question about the estate timeline, something small about probate paperwork I needed for my taxes. She was polite, professional, the way lawyers are when they're being careful about what they say. But right before we hung up, I heard her set the phone down without covering the receiver all the way. Somebody else was in her office. A man's voice, not Marjorie's, said something about the Callaways landing Friday and closing the sale by the 15th. I didn't know what sale. I didn't know which Callaways, though the name rang a bell from somewhere in Derek's endless talk about his fiancé's family. I wrote it down anyway, on the back of a gas receipt, because that's what I do. I write things down. Marjorie came back on the line a second later, apologized for the noise, and finished answering my question like nothing had happened. I boarded that ship alone on a Thursday afternoon. Nobody waved me off. Nobody asked where I was headed. I stood at the railing while the horn sounded and Charleston pulled away behind us, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, nobody in my life knew exactly where I was. I liked it. I want to be honest about that. It didn't feel like exile. It felt like the first quiet room I'd had in years. I had no idea that 2 days later, a purser would come find me with an envelope stamped from Ashcroft, Prentice, and Wall, addressed in my grandfather's own handwriting on the front, like he'd written it himself and asked somebody to hold it until I turned 30. 3 days into a birthday, nobody in my family had bothered to remember. I had even less idea what was inside it. But Earl Prentice never did anything without a reason, and he'd told me himself not to let anybody talk me out of opening it. Nobody was there to try. The purser was young, maybe 22, with a name tag that said Emile and an accent I couldn't place. He held the envelope like it might be something ordinary. A ship, a package, a Tuesday. Ms. Marsh? This came in with the mail transfer at Nassau. Legal courier, ma'am. They asked us to confirm it reached you in person. I signed his little screen with my finger. My name came out crooked. The envelope was heavier than paper should be. Cream-colored, the kind of stock law offices buy by the box. Ashcroft, Prentice, and Wall, printed in the corner in navy ink. Underneath it, in handwriting I would have known anywhere, my grandfather had written my name. Colleen Ray Marsh, not Colleen Sorrell. He never once called me that, even when everybody else in that house did. I didn't open it in the hallway. I carried it back to my cabin, sat down on the little bench under the porthole that wasn't really a porthole, just a painted circle with a light behind it, and I held it in my lap for a full minute before I broke the seal. Here's what I want you to understand about Earl Prentice. He wasn't a sentimental man. He fixed his own roof at 78. He balanced his own checkbook by hand until the week he died. If he was sending me something from beyond a courier service and a law office, it wasn't a birthday card. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. 2 things fell into my lap. A letter, folded in thirds, and a smaller envelope underneath it, sealed again, with one line on the front. Open this only after you've read mine. I unfolded the first page. Colleen, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and it's your 30th birthday, and Marjorie did exactly what I asked her to do, which was wait. I want to tell you why you weren't raised as Colleen Prentice. It's a short answer, and it isn't a kind one, so brace yourself. Denise asked me not to correct people when they called you her daughter. She said it made things simpler. I let her have that because you were happy, and because I thought simple was harmless. It wasn't harmless. It let her treat you like something she was owed instead of someone she was raising. I stopped reading for a second. My hands had gone cold, actually cold, the way they do when you stand too long in front of an open freezer. I set the page on my knee and looked out at the water through that fake little porthole light, and I made myself breathe before I picked it back up. I know about the trust disbursements, Earl had written. I set enough aside for your schooling and nothing else. I found out 4 years ago that money had moved through your account and back out of it faster than any tuition bill could explain. I didn't say anything then. I wanted proof, not a family fight I'd lose at 80. I have the proof now. It's with Marjorie. I want you to ask her for it before you ask Denise for anything. There was more. A line about the cruise, which stopped my breath entirely. I heard about the cabin list. I'm not surprised. A woman who'll spend a child's tuition money isn't going to blink at leaving her off a boat. He'd known. Somehow, in the last weeks of his life, he'd known what was coming, or close enough to it, and he'd built a letter that would land in my hands 3 days after they sailed off without me. Don't let anybody talk you out of opening it, he'd said on the phone. Now I understood which it he meant. Not the letter. The smaller envelope underneath it. I picked it up. My name again, in his handwriting, on the front. Only after you've read mine. I'd read his. I opened the second one. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a single sheet, printed, not handwritten, with a heading across the top that read, Notice of Property Listing, and under it, an address I knew better than my own childhood bedroom. 4 Cove Landing Road, High Rock Lake, Earl's cabin. The one where he died in his sleep 5 weeks earlier. The one where I'd learned to fish off the end of a dock that still had my initials carved into a post from when I was 9. Listed for sale. Closing date 9 days out. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misreading a form. I wasn't. Somebody had put my grandfather's cabin on the market less than 5 weeks after he died, and the closing was set for a date that was going to arrive while half my family was still floating around the Bahamas taking pictures of piña coladas. I did the thing I do. I got a legal pad from the little desk in that cabin and I wrote down every date. Earl's death, the listing date, the closing date. The day Denise handed me that folder in the kitchen. I laid them out in a column because dates in a column tell you things dates in a sentence don't. 9 days. That's what I had before that cabin belonged to somebody else. I called Marjorie Ashcroft from the ship's satellite line, which cost more per minute than I want to admit, and she picked up on the second ring like she'd been waiting for it. Colleen. I take it you opened it. Both of them, I said. Marjorie, why is Earl's cabin listed for sale? She was quiet for a second. The kind of quiet lawyers use when they're deciding how much they're allowed to say. That property isn't supposed to be listed at all, she said. It's held inside the trust structure until probate closes. If somebody filed paperwork to sell it, that's outside of what your grandfather authorized. Somebody filed it anyway. I'll need to see the listing agreement. Can you get me the agent's name? I already had it. It was right there on the printed sheet, under a logo I didn't recognize. A real estate office out of Lexington. I read it to her. I'll call them first thing tomorrow, she said. Colleen, I want you to understand something. Your grandfather built protections into that trust specifically because he suspected this. If someone advanced themselves money from it without disclosure, there's a clause that changes everything downstream. I can't discuss the details over an open line, but I need you back in Salisbury as soon as this cruise lets you off that boat. I'm 4 days out still. Then use them, she said. Get me anything you have. Statements, letters, anything with a date on it. I thought about the fireproof box sitting in my closet, 6 years of certified mail I'd never had a reason to read twice. I didn't tell her about it yet. I wanted to look at it myself first. That night, I lay in that narrow cabin bed with the ship rocking under me just enough to notice, and I thought about Denise's kitchen, the folder, the laminated itinerary. I thought about the way she'd said blood like it was a fact instead of a decision she'd made about me a long time ago. Bloodline, she'd said, close enough. As if 12 years of Sunday dinners and school forms and every ordinary Tuesday of my childhood didn't count for anything against a word. I thought about calling her right then. I didn't. Instead, I opened my messages and typed something short, something that wouldn't give away a thing. "How's the lake house holding up?" I typed. "Thinking about Grandpa today." I sent it and put the phone face down on the nightstand. It took her 11 minutes to answer, long enough that I pictured her reading it twice, deciding what version of true she wanted to give me. "Still standing, sweetheart," she wrote back. "Peaceful as ever. We should all go up together sometime and remember him properly." I read that twice myself. Peaceful as ever. Not for sale in 9 days. Not sitting in a real estate listing with a lockbox on the door, which is exactly what that agent's paperwork had described. I didn't write back right away. I just looked at the two messages sitting there next to each other, hers and mine, and thought about how easy it is to lie to somebody who already knows the answer. I turned my phone off, and for the first time since Charleston, I didn't feel like a woman who'd been cut from a list. I felt like a woman holding a pen over the right line, waiting for the moment to write something down that couldn't be erased. The ship worked its way back toward Charleston over the next 3 days, and I spent most of that time at a little table in the ship's library, which nobody used, going through numbers instead of watching the ocean. I'd asked the front desk to print me copies of everything in Marjorie's first email, and by the time we docked, I had a stack of pages that meant more to me than any souvenir I could have bought in Nassau. Here's what a claims investigator does when she has a suspicion. She doesn't confront anybody. She builds a table. I built mine on graph paper because that's what the ship's gift shop had, right next to the postcards. 1 column for dates. 1 for amounts, 1 for source. I started filling it in from memory, then from the statements Marjorie had sent, and by the second day the shape of it made my stomach turn in a slow, cold way. 12 years. Withdrawals from the education trust that never once lined up with a tuition bill. Small ones at first, 800 here, 1,200 there, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Then, 4 years back, one that made me stop and read it 3 times. $19,000, pulled out in a single disbursement, memo line blank. I flew home from Charleston to Charlotte and drove straight to Salisbury without stopping, my suitcase still smelling like sea air in the trunk. The fireproof box was exactly where I'd left it, on the top shelf of my closet, behind a stack of winter sweaters. I hauled it down to my kitchen table and opened it up next to the pages Marjorie had sent, and for 2 hours I did the only kind of work I've ever been good at. I matched paper to paper. Every certified letter the county had mailed me about the trust, going back to when I turned 18, sat in that box in order. Every one of them listed a balance, and every single balance was lower than what Earl's original numbers said it should have been. $19,000, gone in one draw, the same year Gary's hardware store on Statesville Boulevard got a new roof and a paint job and a sign out front that said Sorrell's Ace Hardware, established 1987, renovated. I remembered that renovation. I was 26. Denise had told everybody at Thanksgiving that Gary had gotten a small business loan. I picked up my phone and called Marjorie. "I found a $19,000 draw from 4 years ago," I said. "No memo. Does your file have anything on it?" "It has a signature," Marjorie said. "Yours." That stopped me cold. I never signed anything like that. I didn't think you had, she said, which is why I already sent it to a document examiner. Colleen, I want you to sit with this before I tell you the rest, because there's more. Tell me, your grandfather's ledger, the one he kept himself, separate from the county's records, shows total undisclosed withdrawals over 12 years at just over $61,000. And 3 months ago, Gary took out a new loan against the store. $64,000. I pulled it from the county register this morning. $61,000 taken. $64,000 borrowed. The math sat there in front of me like a hole shaped exactly like a person. There's a clause in your grandfather's trust, Marjorie went on. He built it in himself 6 years ago, before he ever found the first discrepancy. If any trustee advances undisclosed funds to themselves or a family member without documentation, the residual estate reverts entirely to the named remainder beneficiary. That's you. It's not a maybe, Colleen. It's automatic once it's proven. And the cabin? That's the part that worries me. The listing agent confirmed the paperwork was filed by Denise, using a power of attorney. She says your grandfather signed before he died. I've requested the original. If it's not real, that's not just a trust violation. That's fraud on a filed document. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone against my ear and looked at the graph paper in front of me, at the column of numbers I'd built out of 11 years of habit, and I thought about Denise standing in that kitchen with the folder, telling me I'd never really been their real family. I want to see her, I said. In person. Before you file anything. Marjorie was quiet for a second. Why? Because I want to hear what she says when I ask her something small. She's not careful when she thinks nobody's checking. Be careful yourself, Marjorie said. If she suspects you know anything close to this, she may try to move faster on that closing. 9 days out is already fast. Then let's not give her a reason to make it 7. I told her I'd be careful. I wasn't sure yet if that was true. I called Denise that evening, my voice easy, my voice the same voice I used on the phone with contractors who thought I wouldn't notice their math. I told her I'd had a good trip, that the ship had a lovely little library, that I'd been thinking about Earl the whole time. I asked if I could come by Sunday, for dinner, like always. Of course, sweetheart, she said. We'd love that. Sunday dinner at the house on Innes Street looked exactly like it had for 12 years. Pot roast, the good tablecloth, Gary carving like he did it for a living instead of running a hardware store that was apparently $64,000 deeper in debt than anybody at that table wanted to say out loud. Derek showed up with his fiancée, Ashlyn Calloway, which I hadn't expected. She was polished in the way people are when somebody's coached them on how to hold a fork at a table that isn't theirs yet. Her father, she mentioned twice, was flying in from Wilmington that week to talk business with Gary. Business? I said, mild as milk. What kind of business? Denise answered before Gary could. Just some friendly advice. Randall's got a good head for numbers. Randall Calloway, I said, like I was placing the name for the first time, even though I'd been carrying it around on the back of a gas receipt for 2 weeks. Isn't he the one who does all that lending out of Wilmington? Ashlyn brightened. Daddy's an investor. He's actually thinking about putting some money into Gary's store, expanding it. Maybe a second location. Gary's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Denise's smile didn't move, but her eyes did, just slightly toward her son. That's wonderful, I said. Investors like clean books, though, don't they? I'd think he'd want to see everything before he signs anything. The table went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the pot roast. We keep clean books, Gary said, too fast. I'm sure you do. I took a sip of my tea. How's the lake house, by the way? I keep meaning to drive up there. I miss that dock. Denise's hand found her napkin and folded it, unfolded it, folded it again. It's fine, sweetheart. Just sitting there. Peaceful. Funny, I said. I heard it might be under contract. I hadn't planned to say it that plainly. It came out of me clean and quiet. the way the truest things do. Gary set his fork down entirely. Denise's smile finally cracked, just at the corners, just enough that I saw it. "Where would you hear something like that?" she said. "I read things," I said. "It's what I do." Derek looked between his parents like he was seeing something for the first time, and maybe he was. Ashlyn just kept eating, oblivious, asking Denise to pass the rolls. Nobody answered my question. Denise changed the subject to Ashlyn's wedding colors, and the rest of the dinner went the way dinners go when everybody at the table is performing normal for somebody who's stopped believing in it. I left that night with a headache and a certainty I hadn't had before. They weren't just hiding an old debt. They were racing a closing date to cover a new one, with Randall Calloway's money and reputation riding right behind it, and they needed the lake house sold and the books clean before he landed for good. I called Marjorie from my car in the driveway. "She knows I know something," I said. I watched it land on her face. "Then we move," Marjorie said. "I've already got the document examiner's preliminary read on that power of attorney. It's not a match to your grandfather's signature from the same year, not even close. So it's forged." "It's forged," she said. "Colleen, I want to request an emergency hearing with the clerk of court to freeze that listing before closing. It'll put everything on the record, in front of everyone involved, including the Calloways if they choose to show up. That's the only way to stop a sale 9 days out and make it stick." I thought about that table, the folded napkin, the fork set down. I thought about Earl's letter sitting folded in my nightstand drawer, telling me not to let anybody talk me out of opening it. "Do it," I said. "Set the hearing." "It'll be public record," Marjorie said. "Once we file, there's no quiet way through this anymore." "I don't want quiet," I said. "I want it on paper, where nobody in that family can call it a misunderstanding." 2 days after that dinner, my phone rang with a number I didn't know. Lexington area code. "Ms. Marsh? This is Roy Tatum. I'm the listing agent on the Cove Landing property." I sat up straight at my kitchen table. "I know who you are, Mr. Tatum. I figured you might after your attorney called my office yesterday." He cleared his throat. "Look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of a family thing, but I've got a closing date on my calendar, and now I've got a lawyer telling me the seller's authority might not be real. I don't want my name on anything that isn't clean." "I appreciate that," I said. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Who's buying it?" There was a pause, the kind where you can hear somebody deciding how much trouble they're already in. "It's an LLC, Cove Capital Partners, registered out of Wilmington." Wilmington. I wrote it down and underlined it twice. "Do you know who's behind that LLC?" "I only deal with the buyer's agent," he said. "But between us, the offer came in low. Real low. $142,000 cash, no inspection contingency. That cabin's worth closer to $185 on that lake. Mrs. Sorrell told me to take it anyway. Said she needed it done fast, not done right. $142,000. $43,000 under market, and she'd told him to take it. Nobody sells a lake cabin $43,000 under value unless speed matters more than the money. Or unless the money was never really the point. "Mr. Tatum, I need you to hold off signing anything until my attorney gets back to you. Can you do that?" "I was already planning to," he said. "Between you and me, I don't love the smell of this one." I thanked him and hung up, and I sat there a minute looking at the name I'd written down. Cove Capital Partners, Wilmington. I typed it into my phone right next to another name I'd been carrying around for 2 weeks. Randall Calloway, Wilmington investor. I didn't have proof they were the same thing yet, but I've done enough claims work to know when two facts are standing too close together to be strangers. I called Marjorie. "The buyer's an LLC out of Wilmington," I said. "Cove Capital Partners. Cash offer, $43,000 under market, no inspection. Denise told the agent to take it fast, not right." Marjorie went quiet for a second. "Wilmington's a small world for that kind of money." Give me an hour. It took her 40 minutes. She called back sounding like a woman who'd just found the last piece of a puzzle she'd been building blind. Cove Capital Partners was registered 6 weeks ago, she said. One officer listed, Randall Calloway. I felt something settle into place, cold and exact, like a key turning. So he's not investing in the store, I said. He's buying the cabin. He's doing both, Marjorie said. I think I understand it now, Colleen. Gary needs to show Randall a clean balance sheet before the wedding, or before he commits real money to a second location. So Denise sells Earl's cabin to Randall's shell company, quiet, under market, cash. That cash goes straight into the store's books as a capital injection. On paper, it looks like Gary found new investment. In truth, they're selling your grandfather's land to fake their own solvency, and Randall gets waterfront property $43,000 under value as the thank you. I sat there and could not say a word for a second. And Derek, I finally said, does he marry into it clean, or does he know exactly what his in-laws are buying? I don't know that part yet, Marjorie said, but I'll tell you what I do know. This isn't just a trust violation anymore. If Randall Calloway is both the undisclosed buyer and the disclosed investor, and the purchase price is deliberately below value to launder it through as a loan repayment, that's not a family mess. That's fraud on a document filed with the county involving somebody outside the family. Which means I'm not asking the clerk for a quiet freeze anymore, she said. I'm asking for an emergency hearing on the record, and I want the Callaways named as interested parties. If Randall's smart, and I think he is, he pulls out the second he sees his name on a court filing next to the word fraud. Men like that don't survive scandal. They survive by outrunning it. When? I'm filing tomorrow morning. The clerk's office told me they can hear an emergency motion to stay a sale within 5 business days if there's evidence of fraud on a filed instrument. I have the forged power of attorney. I have the ledger. I have your box. That's enough to get us in front of a judge before that closing date arrives. 5 days. 9 days until closing. 5 until a hearing. That left 4 days of daylight between a judge's ruling and a house changing hands that never should have been for sale at all. I want to be there, I said. In the room. You'll need to be, Marjorie said. You're the one with the account statements in your name. You're the one Earl's letter was addressed to. If this is going to stick, the judge needs to hear it from you, not just from me. I thought about Ashlyn at the table, asking Denise to pass the rolls. No idea what her father's LLC was really buying. I thought about Derek watching his parents' faces go tight over pot roast and not asking why. Does Derek get told? I asked. Before the hearing? That's your call, Marjorie said, not mine. I didn't answer right away. Derek had spent his whole life being the one they meant when they said family. He didn't build this. He might not even know the shape of it. But he was standing at the edge of marrying into a man who was about to buy stolen land with borrowed money, and somebody was going to have to decide whether that counted as an emergency too. I called him that night. He picked up on the third ring, background noise like a television turned low. Hey, Colleen, everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to just answer it, I said. Do you know anything about Randall buying property up at the lake? The silence on his end went on a beat too long. What lake property? Grandpa's cabin, I said. It's under contract to a company that traces back to Randall. That's not? He stopped himself. Mom said the cabin was just sitting empty. She never said anything about selling it. Derek, I need you to trust me on this. Don't say anything to your mom yet. Not until I tell you it's okay. Colleen, what's going on? I looked down at the graph paper on my table, at the column of numbers that had taken over my kitchen for a week straight. There's a hearing, I said, in 5 days, about the trust and about that cabin. I think your mom's been moving money out of it since I was 18. I think she needs that sale to cover a hole at the store before your fiancé's father finds out how deep it goes. He didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone flat in a way I'd never heard from him. Is that why you weren't on the cruise list? That's exactly why. She told me you didn't want to come. She said you'd already made other plans. A short, hard breath. I'm sorry. I should have asked more. You didn't know what to ask, I said. Neither did I for a long time. What do you need from me? That question sat differently coming from him than it would have from anybody else at that table. 12 years, and it was the first time a Sorel had asked me that instead of telling me what they needed from him. Just don't warn her, I said, and be there. Friday, in the courtroom. I'll be there, he said. Colleen, for what it's worth, you were always my real family. She was wrong about that part, whatever else is true. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen a long minute, looking at the box, the ledger, the graph paper, all of it laid out like evidence because that's exactly what it was. 5 days. I picked up my pen and started building the timeline I'd hand the judge, one line at a time, the way I'd built 100 claims files before this one. Only this time, the claim had my name on it, and the file was the only thing standing between my grandfather's cabin and a closing table nobody in that family wanted me anywhere near. Roy Tatum called again on Tuesday morning, and this time his voice had lost its calm. Ms. Marsh, I need to tell you something, and I don't like it. Go ahead. Mrs. Sorel called my office last night. She wants to move the closing up. Not next week, Wednesday, tomorrow. I set my coffee down slow, the way you do when your hand wants to shake and you won't let it. Why the rush? She didn't say why, just said cash buyers don't like to wait, and neither did she. He paused. I told her I had concerns. She told me to keep them to myself. Thank you for calling me instead, I said. I told you, I don't love the smell of this one. I hung up and called Marjorie before my coffee went cold. They're moving the closing to tomorrow, I said. Denise pushed it. She knows the walls are closing in and she's trying to beat us to the door. Marjorie didn't waste a second on surprise. Then we don't wait for Friday. I'm filing an emergency motion this morning for a temporary restraining order. If the judge signs it today, that closing doesn't happen tomorrow. It doesn't happen at all until the hearing's done. Can you get a judge to sign something that fast? When there's a forged power of attorney and a closing $43,000 under value racing the clock? Yes. Judges don't love being played for fools any more than I do. I heard papers shuffling on her end. Give me till 3 o'clock. I spent the rest of the morning unable to sit still, so I did the only thing that ever settles me. I drove. High Rock Lake sits about 20 minutes outside Salisbury, past the Yadkin River Bridge, down a gravel road that still remembers being dirt. Earl's cabin sat on a rise above the water, tin roof, a dock he'd rebuilt with his own hands the year I turned 16. I hadn't been up there since his funeral. I almost didn't recognize it. There was a U-Haul in the driveway, Gary's truck behind it, tailgate down, and Gary himself, coming out the front door with a cardboard box in his arms, Earl's old fishing rods sticking out the top like something you'd see at a yard sale. He froze when he saw my car. Colleen. He set the box down on the porch steps like it had gotten heavy all at once. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. I got out slow. The lake was flat and gray behind him, no wind at all. Looks like you're cleaning the place out. Denise wants it emptied before the buyer walks through. He wouldn't look at me straight. Says it needs to look ready. Ready for a closing that's tomorrow, I said, instead of next week. His jaw worked. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things now, Gary. I kept my voice easy, the same voice I use on a claim I already know is fraudulent. I know about the $64,000 from the hardware store loan. I know Randall Calloway's LLC is the one buying this cabin, cash, under value. I know that money's supposed to land in your books before he commits to a second location. I let that sit a second. What I don't know yet is whether you knew the power of attorney Denise used to list it was forged. The box of fishing rods might as well have fallen off the porch and shattered, the way his face went. Forged, he said, like he was tasting a word he didn't want in his mouth. Your grandfather-in-law didn't sign that. My attorney's document examiner already confirmed it. Gary sat down on the porch step, hard, like his knees had made the decision without asking him first. She told me it was a formality. She said Earl gave verbal permission before he died, that the paperwork was just catching up to what he wanted. Earl told me something different, I said. In a letter. 3 days before I found out about any of this. He put his head in his hands. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him, and then I remembered the ledger and the $64,000 and the 12 years of birthday cards that never once said trust fund. There's an emergency hearing, I said. It might stop the closing before it happens. I need you to think hard, Gary, about how deep you want to go down with her. He didn't answer. He just sat there on Earl's porch steps, surrounded by Earl's things in cardboard boxes, and said nothing at all. I was back in my car, halfway down the gravel road, when my phone rang with a Wilmington number I didn't recognize. Ms. Marsh? Randall Calloway. I pulled over onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under my tires. Mr. Calloway. I understand there's some confusion about a property transaction, he said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who'd smoothed over 100 rooms before this one. I wanted to reach out directly, one professional to another. That's kind of you. I want to be sure we can resolve this without anything unpleasant happening to anybody's reputation. Mine, yours, or the Sorrels. A pause, just long enough to matter. I'd be happy to make you whole, Ms. Marsh. Whatever figure feels fair, quietly. Before my daughter's wedding becomes part of a conversation it doesn't need to be part of. There it was. The offer, plain as a check written in front of me. Mr. Calloway, that cabin belonged to my grandfather, I said. It isn't about a figure. Everything's about a figure eventually. Not this, I said. I don't raise my voice, Mr. Calloway. I raised the file, and right now my attorney's filing something that has your LLC's name on it. The silence on his end went on longer than the one before. I think you're making a mistake, he said finally. I think you already made yours, I said, 6 weeks ago, when you registered Cove Capital Partners. I hung up before he could answer. My hands were shaking by the time I set the phone down in the cup holder, but not from fear. From something closer to satisfaction, the kind you get when a number finally lines up after hours of chasing it. Marjorie called at 4:15. It's signed, she said. Judge Holloway granted the temporary restraining order an hour ago. No closing tomorrow. No closing at all until the hearing resolves it, one way or the other. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding since Roy Tatum's call that morning. What happens now? Now the county clerk notifies the title company, the listing agent, and the buyer of record that the sale is frozen pending a fraud investigation. She let that land. Randall Calloway's LLC just got named in a court filing, Colleen. Publicly. Same day he called you, I'd guess. He called me an hour before you filed. Then he already knew it was coming. Marjorie's voice had something almost like satisfaction in it, too. Men like that don't stick around once their name's attached to a word like fraud. I'd bet you a dinner he pulls that offer on the store within the week. Friday's still the hearing. Friday's still the hearing, she agreed. But Colleen, listen to me. Word's going to travel fast in a family that size. Denise is going to find out about this order tonight, maybe within the hour. I need you to be ready for what she does with that. I thought about Gary on the porch steps, surrounded by his father-in-law's boxed-up life, saying nothing at all. "She's not going to take it quiet," I said. "No," Marjorie said, "she's not." My phone buzzed twice more before I even got the car back on the road, both from a number I knew by heart. I let it ring through to voicemail the first time. The second time I picked up, because some things you have to hear in a voice instead of text to really believe. "You froze the sale." Denise's voice came through tight, stripped down to something with no sweetness left in it at all. "You had a judge freeze my father's cabin." "It's not your cabin, Denise," I said. "It never was. After everything we did for you." Her voice cracked, but I'd stopped being able to tell which cracks were real. "We raised you. We gave you a home. And this is how you repay us?" "You want to talk about repayment?" I said, and for the first time in 12 years, I let the words come out exactly as flat, and even as I'd always wished they would. "Let's talk about $64,312. Let's talk about that on Friday, in front of a judge." I hung up first this time. The gravel road behind me led back toward the lake, back toward Earl's cabin, sitting empty and half boxed up in the last of the daylight. And I sat there a minute with the engine idling, looking at it in my rearview mirror. 3 days until the hearing. Whatever was coming, it was coming for all of us now, not just for me. Gary didn't call that night. He showed up. I heard tires on the gravel outside my apartment a little after 9, and for a second, I thought it was Denise, come to finish what she'd started on the phone. Instead, it was Gary's truck, engine ticking as it cooled, and Gary standing in my porch light holding a manila envelope like it might bite him. "I can't stay," he said. "Denise thinks I'm at the store. Come in anyway." He wouldn't sit. He stood by my kitchen counter, envelope pressed flat against his chest, and for a second I thought he might turn around and walk back out. "I found something in her desk," he said, "after you left the cabin. I went looking for the closing papers to see how bad it really was." "And?" He set the envelope down like it weighed more than paper should. "There's a HELOC on our house, on Innes Street." I opened the flap slow. Inside was a home equity application, dated 14 months back, Earl Prentice's name signed at the bottom as a co-signer. "Earl didn't live at Innes Street," I said. "Why would he co-sign a loan on your house?" "He didn't," Gary said. "That's not his signature either. I've seen his signature my whole married life. That's not it." I looked up at him. "You're telling me she forged him twice. I'm telling you I don't know how many times." His voice had gone thin, stretched over something that sounded almost like grief. $31,000, Colleen. Against our house. I never signed off on that loan. I didn't know it existed till tonight. I sat down at my table because my legs wanted me to. "Where did the money go?" "I don't know yet. But I know when it hit our account. Same month the roof needed replacing, and the same month Derek's ring came out of nowhere." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I thought we'd finally caught a break. I never once asked her where a break like that comes from." I thought about Marjorie's voice on the phone earlier. Forgery on a filed instrument. That's not a family mess anymore. Now it was 2 instruments, 2 forged signatures, 2 institutions that would want an explanation neither Gary nor Denise could give them. "You need to give this to Marjorie," I said. "Tonight, if you can. If I do that, I'm turning in my own wife. If you don't, you're a co-signer on a fraud you didn't commit," I said. "Right now you're a victim, Gary. The second you sit on this, you start looking like a partner." He stood there a long moment, envelope still between us on the table, like it might change its mind about what was inside it. Then he nodded, once, and picked it back up. "I'll call her office in the morning," he said. "Not because I want to, because I don't see another way through it." I watched his taillights pull out of the lot a few minutes later, and I sat back down at my table and looked at the copy I'd made of that HELOC application before he left. $31,000. On top of the 64. On top of a cabin sold $43,000 under value to a man who'd tried to buy my silence that same afternoon. I did the math without meaning to, the way I always do. $95,000 moved through forged signatures inside 14 months. That wasn't a woman covering one bad quarter at a hardware store. That was a pattern. My phone rang before I'd even finished writing the number down. A number I didn't know, area code from down toward Wilmington again, but not Randall's this time. Ms. Marsh? This is Ashlyn. Ashlyn Calloway. I hadn't expected her voice to be so young. Not girlish, just young, the way people sound before life has had a real run at them yet. Ashlyn, I said. I didn't expect to hear from you. I know, I'm sorry to call so late. A breath, unsteady. My dad's been on the phone with his lawyer since 6 o'clock. He won't tell me why. Derek won't tell me anything either. He just keeps saying it's a family thing and I shouldn't worry. Her voice cracked at the edges. Is my wedding about to fall apart because of something your family did? I thought about how to answer that. I thought about my calm line, the one I'd built my whole career on. I don't raise my voice. I raise the file. But this wasn't a file. This was a 20-something girl on the other end of a phone, about to find out her father might be the reason a house of cards was still standing at all. Ashlyn, I'm not going to lie to you, I said. There's a property. It belonged to my grandfather. Denise tried to sell it under a signature that wasn't real, to cover money that isn't hers. Your dad's LLC was the buyer. The silence went on so long I thought the call had dropped. Cove Capital, she said finally. Quiet. That's my dad's company. I've seen the letterhead in his office my whole life. Then you already know more than Derek does. Derek doesn't know any of this, she said. Does he? He knows there's a hearing, I said. He doesn't know your dad's name is on the deal yet. I didn't think that was mine to tell him. It's not fair, keeping him in the dark like that. Her voice had steadied, gone hard in a way I hadn't expected from someone who still sounded like she should be worrying about seeding charts, not fraud. He's marrying into this family too. He should get to hear it from someone before it lands on him in a courtroom. You could be the one who tells him, I said. Might mean more, coming from you. She didn't answer that right away. When she did, her voice had gone very small. My dad said he'd handle it quietly. That's what he does. He handles things quietly, and then everybody just forgets to ask how. A pause. I don't want a marriage that starts with something quiet like that sitting underneath it. Then don't let it, I said. That's the only advice I've got tonight. She thanked me, in a voice that didn't sound thankful so much as tired, and hung up. I sat there with my phone warm in my hand, thinking about a girl I'd never met, who just found out the man who raised her had a name on a deed he never should have touched. Marjorie called me back at 10:40 after Gary had reached her, voice sharper than I'd heard it yet. He brought me the HELOC application himself, she said. Colleen, this is bigger than the cabin now. If that signature's forged too, and I already believe it is, Denise didn't just violate a trust. She committed forgery against a federally regulated lender. That's not county court anymore. That pulls in people I don't control. The bank, and eventually somebody with a badge, if it goes that far. She let out a breath. I don't say that to scare you. I say it because Friday's hearing just got bigger than a stay on one sale. Judge Holloway's going to want to hear about a pattern, not just one document. Does that change anything for Friday? It means I'm adding the HELOC to my filing tonight, she said. It means when we walk into that courtroom, we're not asking for a favor anymore. We're laying out 12 years of one woman's math, on paper, in front of a judge who doesn't like being lied to any more than I do. I thought about Ashlyn's voice, quiet and sure. About Derek, still not knowing his future father-in-law's name was stitched through all of it. About Gary standing in my kitchen holding an envelope like it was the last honest thing he had left. Marjorie, I said, how many people do you think end up in that room Friday who didn't even know they belonged there? All of them, she said. That's usually how it goes, once the truth starts moving. Nobody sends out invitations. It just shows up and takes a seat. I hung up and sat a long while in my kitchen, the HELOC copy next to Earl's ledger, next to the graph paper timeline I'd built for the judge. $95,000, 2 forged signatures, a wedding that might not survive the week, and a girl who'd called me instead of her own father to ask what was true. 3 days until Friday. I picked up my pen, and under the column marked evidence, I added one more line. Morning came in gray over the parking lot outside Piedmont Mutual, and I was at my desk by 8, coffee going cold beside the ledger copy, when Yolanda from the front office knocked on my cubicle wall. Colleen. Mr. Whitfield wants you in his office. Roger Whitfield ran claims for 3 counties. He didn't call people in before 9 unless something had already gone wrong somewhere he couldn't fix it. I found him standing, not sitting, which told me plenty before he said a word. Shut the door, he said. I did. I got a call last night, he said. At home, from a woman named Denise Sorrell. My stomach went tight and still at once, the way it does right before a bad number confirms itself. She says you're using your position here to investigate your own family, Roger said. She says you pulled county records on a relative's property using your work credentials. That's a conflict of interest complaint, Colleen. That's the kind of thing that gets forwarded to the state board. I didn't touch a work system, I said. Not once. Everything I've looked at, I pulled as a private citizen, on my own time, through public record requests. I believe you, he said. But belief doesn't make a complaint go away. I have to open a file. I have to put you on a short leave while it's reviewed. How short? Depends how fast I can clear it. He rubbed his jaw. You're the best investigator I've got, Colleen. You know that. But I can't have a licensing complaint sitting open while you're still working active files. It's not personal. It's very personal, I said. It's designed to be personal. She's not trying to protect the board's integrity, Roger. She's trying to take my credibility off the table 3 days before a hearing that names her. He looked at me a long moment. Then you go win that hearing, he said, and you come back to a desk that's still yours. I can promise you that much. I walked out to my car with a box under my arm that I hadn't filled in 11 years there, badge clipped to the visor instead of my belt, and sat behind the wheel without turning the key. Denise hadn't just moved money. She'd learned somewhere along the way exactly which levers a person like me depended on, and she was pulling everyone she could reach. I called Marjorie from the parking lot. She filed a complaint against me, I said. With my employer. Conflict of interest. Marjorie didn't sound surprised. That's not a legal move, Colleen. That's a scare tactic. It won't touch anything I've filed. It cost me my desk for now. It'll cost her a lot more once Judge Holloway hears she was trying to intimidate a witness 3 days before a hearing on fraud. A pause. Did you keep the voicemail? The one from your boss describing the call? I can get it. Get it today, she said. That's not a distraction, Colleen. That's evidence, too. I sat with that a second. Every time I thought Denise had run out of rope, she found another length of it somewhere. There's more, Marjorie said. Gary called me an hour ago, says the bank flagged something else. Another loan? A business line of credit. $18,500 opened against the store's inventory 2 years back. Gary swears he never authorized a draw against it past the original balance. The bank's compliance office wants documentation by Monday, or they're referring it. 95,000 had already stopped sounding like an accident. Now it was closer to 113,500, moving through paper that didn't belong to the people whose names sat on it. She's not going to stop, I said. Not on her own. No, Marjorie said. which is why Friday matters more than it did yesterday. I drove to my apartment instead of home to Innes Street, which hadn't been home in a long while anyway, and pulled the fireproof box out from under my bed. 12 years of certified mail. Every disbursement notice the county had ever sent me, still in the envelopes, postmarks intact. I laid them out on my kitchen table next to Earl's ledger and started matching dates again, slower this time, because Marjorie needed more than a feeling now. She needed a stack a judge couldn't argue with. That's when my phone rang, a number I hadn't saved but recognized anyway. Derek. I almost didn't answer. 12 years of him getting the college fund, the car, the wedding toast, and me getting a kitchen line about who counted as real family. But something in me wanted to hear what he'd say with no one standing behind him telling him what to say. Colleen. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered it. I need you to tell me the truth. Mom won't. Dad just keeps saying talk to your mother. What do you want to know, Derek? Is it true? About the cabin? About a loan on our house I never signed for? It's true, I said. All of it. The line went quiet enough that I could hear him breathing. Ashlyn's dad is Cove Capital, he said finally, like each word cost him something. That's what she told me last night. She said her father tried to pay you off. He did. I didn't know any of this, Colleen. I swear to you I didn't know. I believe you, I said, and meant it, more than I expected to. But Derek, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens Friday, it isn't about hurting you. It's about a man who died 5 weeks ago, and what he actually wanted done with what he left behind. Grandpa Earl. Grandpa Earl, I said. He tried to tell me before he died. He told me something was coming for my birthday and not to let anyone talk me out of opening it. I didn't understand what he meant until a purser handed me an envelope in the middle of the ocean. Derek didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had gone rough. I always thought you had it easier, he said, being the one everyone worried about. I never once thought about what got paid for out of worrying about you. Now you know, I said. What you do with it is yours. He hung up without saying goodbye, but not the way Denise did, sharp and final. More like a man setting something down he wasn't ready to carry yet. I went back to the table, back to the envelopes, back to matching numbers against Earl's neat, careful hand, and somewhere past midnight I found the one that made my throat go tight. A disbursement dated the week of my 16th birthday, $4,100, listed as school enrichment. I had never taken an enrichment class in my life. That was the week Denise bought the boat Gary kept at the lake for exactly 1 summer before it sat under a tarp behind the shed. I wrote it down under the column marked evidence, next to the $18,500, next to the $31,000, next to the $64,312. 2 days left until Friday, and the numbers on my table had stopped looking like a family's mistakes a long time ago. They looked like a plan, built one quiet withdrawal at a time, and I was the only person who had kept every single receipt. I got the voicemail from HR the next morning. A woman named Patrice in compliance pulled it from Roger's line and burned it to a disk for me, no questions asked, because she'd worked claims with me for 6 years and knew what a real complaint sounded like versus what this was. Play it once for yourself before you send it anywhere, she said. You'll want to hear her voice again before a judge does. I sat in my car in the Piedmont Mutual lot and played it. Denise, clipped and formal, using words like conflict of interest and unauthorized access like she'd rehearsed them in a mirror. Not one word about a cabin. Not one word about $64,000 or $31,000 or $18,500. Just my name, said the way you'd report a leak in a roof. I emailed the file to Marjorie before I even started the engine. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Not Marjorie. A voice I didn't know, deep, careful, the kind of careful that costs money to learn. Ms. Marsh, Randall Calloway. I sat up straighter without meaning to. Mr. Calloway. I'll be brief, he said. I understand you've turned down one number already. I want you to hear the real one before Friday makes this ugly for everyone, including you. I'm listening. $400,000, he said. Structured however you like. Lump sum, trust, doesn't matter. In exchange, you withdraw whatever's been filed and let the cabin sale close as agreed. 400,000. 10 times what he'd offered through his lawyer at the marina. That wasn't a bribe anymore. That was fear, dressed up as generosity. Why does one lake cabin matter that much to you, Mr. Calloway? The line went quiet, just long enough to tell me I'd landed somewhere real. Because I have $180,000 sitting inside Cove Capital's line to Gary's store, he said finally. Money, my own board doesn't know, left our fund. If a judge starts asking where the Sorrells' money's been going, Ms. Marsh, that question doesn't stop at your family. There it was. Not love for his daughter's future in-laws, $180,000 of somebody else's trust, quietly parked where nobody was supposed to look. You should talk to a lawyer of your own, I said. Not about me. About that. I have 4 of them, he said, sharp now. Then I imagine at least one has already told you Friday's a problem you can't buy your way out of. I kept my voice even, the way I always do. I don't raise my voice, Mr. Calloway. I raise the file. And there's a lot more in it than a cabin now. He hung up without another word. I sat there a second, phone warm in my hand, and thought about Ashlyn, 20-something, picking a dress for a wedding paid for by money nobody was supposed to be able to trace. Marjorie called before lunch, and her voice had a different pitch to it, the kind she got when a real find had landed in her lap. I need you to hear this sitting down, she said. I'm always sitting down these days, Marjorie. Go ahead. The notary on the cabin deed. Sharon Betts. A pause, papers shuffling somewhere on her end. Her commission expired 8 months before she stamped that document. I let that sit a second. Expired how? She never renewed after her last term ran out, Marjorie said, which means every notarization she's touched since, including yours truly's forged deed, is void on its face. Not just fraudulent. Legally nothing. Does she work with Denise? Cashier at the hardware store, Marjorie said. 6 years running. I called the Rowan County Register of Deeds this morning to confirm the expiration, and the clerk there got very interested very fast. Apparently, they've had 2 other filings cross their desk this year with Sharon Betts's seal on them. 2 others. One's a car title transfer. One's a small business bill of sale. Marjorie's voice had gone flat and careful. I don't know yet if those connect to Denise, but I know Friday just got a witness on the list she isn't going to enjoy. I thought about Sharon Betts, ringing up nails and paint thinner behind a counter in Salisbury, stamping whatever Denise put in front of her. Whether she knew what she was doing or just trusted the woman who signed her paychecks. Will she testify? I asked. She will if the alternative is losing her job and maybe worse, Marjorie said. I've got a subpoena ready. Once she's served, she's not Denise's cashier anymore. She's a witness under oath. You've been busy. I sleep 4 hours a night this week, Marjorie said. I'll sleep in October. A breath. Colleen, I want you to understand what Friday actually is now. It started as a stay-on-one sale. It's grown into forged instruments across 3 banks, an expired notary seal touching who knows how many other filings, and an outside investor with $180,000 he doesn't want his own board asking about. I know. Judge Holloway's clerk called my office an hour ago, she said. Wanted to know if I needed more time on the docket. I told her 40 minutes wouldn't be enough anymore. She gave me the whole morning. I looked out my windshield at the gray sky over the Piedmont Mutual lot, at a building I wasn't allowed to sit inside anymore because of a phone call meant to scare me quiet. Whatever happens Friday, I said, it isn't just about a cabin now. No, Marjorie said. It's about 12 years of somebody thinking nobody kept the receipts. I drove home that afternoon past the hardware store on Main Street, the one with Sorrel painted across the window in letters that had been there since I was a kid. Gary's truck sat out front. Through the glass, I could see him at the register, ringing up a bag of screws for an old man in a feed cap, smiling like nothing in his life had cracked open in the last 3 days. I didn't stop. I just drove past, slow, and thought about $180,000 sitting somewhere inside that little store's books, money that belonged to people who'd never heard the name Sorrel in their lives. Friday was 2 mornings away. I went home and laid Randall's call out on paper next to everything else. Another line under the column marked evidence, and for the first time all week, I didn't feel like the only one running out of places to hide. Denise didn't call first. She just showed up at 7 that evening, standing on the little concrete step outside my apartment with her arms crossed over a cardigan she'd probably worn to church that morning. "You gonna let me in?" she said. "Or are we doing this on the porch? We can do it here." Her jaw tightened. 12 years of watching that jaw tell me things she wouldn't say out loud. "I raised you," she said, "fed you, clothed you, put you through that whole ugly stretch after your mama passed. And this is what I get. Lawyers, subpoenas, my own hardware store bank calling Gary like he's some kind of criminal." "Nobody made him take out that line of credit," I said. "Nobody made you sign my name on a cabin deed either." She flinched at that, just barely, and covered it fast. "I never signed your name to anything." "Sharon Betts's seal says otherwise," I said. "Except her seal expired 8 months before she stamped it. So legally, Denise, that deed doesn't exist. It never did." For a second, she didn't have a comeback ready. That almost never happened. "You think a judge cares about some cashier's paperwork?" she said finally. "I think a judge cares about $113,500 moving through accounts with my name and Gary's name on them, without either of us knowing," I said. "I think a judge cares a lot." "That money kept this family standing," she snapped. "You think Gary's store runs itself? You think Derek's wedding pays for itself? There it was, not an accident, not a slip." She'd just told me, standing on my own step, exactly what the money had gone to hold up. "Say that again," I said quietly. She caught herself too late. "I didn't mean it like that." "You said Derek's wedding pays for itself," I said. "Off what, Denise? Off the $64,000 from the cabin loan? Off the $18,500 from Gary's business line? Or the $4,100 you called school enrichment the summer you bought that boat?" Her face went white, then red, fast enough that I almost felt something for her. Almost. "You've been keeping notes," she said. "This whole time. Every birthday, every Christmas, you were sitting there keeping notes on your own family." "I was keeping receipts," I said. "Because somebody had to." She stood there a second longer, arms still crossed, and then she said the thing I think she'd come to say the whole time, underneath everything else. "Your grandfather always did favor you," she said. "I don't know why. You weren't even his by blood, not really. Not once your mama married into it. But he'd look at you a certain way." Her voice cracked on the edge of something that might have been grief, might have been just fear dressed up as grief. "I used to wonder what you had that I didn't." "He saw who kept a promise," I said, "and who didn't." She left without another word, her cardigan pulled tight, her car door slamming loud enough that a neighbor's porch light clicked on across the street. I stood in my doorway a while after her taillights disappeared, and thought about Earl's voice on that last phone call, thin and careful, telling me something was coming for my birthday and not to let anyone talk me out of opening it. He'd known. Maybe not every number, but he'd known enough to build a document that could survive her. My phone buzzed before I even got the door locked. "Ashlyn." "I need to tell you something," she said, before I could even say hello. "I've been sitting on it since this morning, and I can't anymore. Go ahead. The deposit on our wedding venue. The Cottle Creek place, out past the lake. Her voice shook a little. It was $11,000. My dad wrote most of the check, but Denise covered $3,500 of it. In cash. When? 6 weeks ago. A pause. I only know because I helped Mrs. Denise, count it out at her kitchen table. She said it was coming out of the store's line of credit, some kind of business promotion thing. Write it off as marketing. Ashlyn's breath caught. That's not what a business line of credit is for. Is it? No, I said. It's not. So my wedding, she said, is sitting on top of money that isn't even hers to spend. I let that settle a second before I answered, because she needed the truth plain, not softened. 3,500 of it, yes, I said. There may be more once the bank finishes its review. She didn't cry, which surprised me. She just went quiet, the kind of quiet that meant she was doing math in her head, the same way I always did. My dad's going to lose it when he hears this, she said. Not about the money. About the fact that his future in-laws would let something like this touch our wedding and never say a word. Your dad already knows more than he's told you, I said. He offered me $400,000 2 days ago to make sure Friday never happens. The line went dead silent. He what? He called it a settlement, I said. I called it what it was. Why would he do that? Her voice had gone small. Unless... Ask him, I said. I think it's past time somebody in your family did. She hung up without saying goodbye, and I sat down at my kitchen table again, next to the fireproof box, next to Earl's ledger, and added one more figure under the column marked evidence. $3,500, wedding deposit, 6 weeks prior, drawn from a business account that didn't belong to a wedding at all. Marjorie called an hour later, and I could hear something in her voice I hadn't heard all week. Not tired, charged. Randall Calloway's attorney reached out to my office this afternoon, she said. Wants to file a motion to intervene in Friday's hearing. Intervene how? He wants standing, Marjorie said. Wants to argue his firm's investment in the sorrel business is a separate matter from the trust dispute, and that pulling on one thread shouldn't be allowed to unravel the other. Can he do that? He can ask, Marjorie said. Judge Holloway doesn't have to grant it. And honestly, Colleen, if his lawyer's filing paperwork this fast, it means Randall's already told his own board something's wrong. That's not a man protecting his daughter's wedding anymore. That's a man protecting his job. I thought about Randall's voice on the phone, sharp and careful, telling me $180,000 sat somewhere his own board didn't know about. Will it change anything Friday? No, Marjorie said. If anything, it helps us. A fund manager fighting to keep his name out of a fraud hearing tells a judge everything she needs to know about how deep this goes. A pause. I also heard back from the Rowan County Register of Deeds. Sharon Betts has been served. How'd she take it? She called my office in tears, Marjorie said. Says Denise told her it was routine paperwork. Says she never once thought to ask why a woman who runs a cash register was being handed cabin deeds to stamp. Marjorie's voice hardened. She's agreed to testify, under oath, on the record, this Friday morning. I sat with that a moment, the whole shape of it stretching wider every day. A notary who didn't know what she was signing. A future son-in-law's father trying to buy his way clear. A wedding built on borrowed money nobody had approved. And somewhere at the center of all of it, Denise, standing on my step an hour earlier, telling me her son's wedding paid for itself. One more thing, Marjorie said. Judge Holloway's clerk confirmed the room. Courtroom 4, 9 a.m. Full docket cleared around it. She's treating this like what it is. Which is? The biggest fraud case Rowan County's seen out of a single family in a long while, Marjorie said. Get some sleep, Colleen. Bring the box, bring every envelope. Friday, we put it all on one table, and there won't be room left for anybody to look away. I hung up and sat in my kitchen a long while, the ledger open in front of me, the fireproof box within reach, Ashlyn's voice still echoing in my ear. $3,500 of wedding money. $180,000 of Randall's fund. $64,000 of a forged cabin deed. $18,500 draining out of Gary's store. Every number sat there in that column, patient, exact, waiting on a room that hadn't opened its doors yet. Outside my window, the streetlight buzzed on over the parking lot, and somewhere across town on Innes Street, I imagined Denise sitting in her own kitchen, staring at a phone that hadn't stopped ringing all week, finally understanding that the girl who used to sit quiet at the far end of her table had never once stopped counting. Gary showed up at 9 that night. No cardigan, no crossed arms, just a windbreaker zipped wrong and a look on his face like something had already caved in. Colleen. His voice cracked on my name. Can we talk? I stepped back and let him in, because Gary had never once come to my door in 12 years. Not for a birthday, not for anything. He stood in my kitchen holding a folded piece of paper like it burned his hand. Bank froze the line this afternoon, he said. 18,500. Gone. Can't touch it, can't move it, nothing. That's the account Denise used for the cabin costs, I said. Not a surprise. It's my store, Colleen. His jaw worked. 40 years my daddy ran that register. Now some compliance officer in Charlotte's got it locked because of paperwork I never even saw. You saw the deposits, I said. You just never asked where they came from. He flinched, same as Denise had on my step. Something in that family flinched the same way, every time. I want to show you something, he said, and I don't want you to hate me more than you already do. He unfolded the paper. A printed text thread, screenshots stitched together, dated 6 weeks back. That's Derek's phone, he said. He left it logged into the family cloud thing. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a receipt. I took the pages from him and read. Derek, to his mother. Ashlyn's dad wants a number for the venue by Friday. Can we move the store thing faster? Denise, back. Already moved. Told the bank it's inventory restock. Don't mention it to Ashlyn or Randall, just say it's covered. Derek. And if Colleen asks about the cabin sale? Denise. She won't. She's never asked once in 12 years. I read that last line twice. She'd been so sure of it. So sure the girl at the end of her table would keep sitting quiet forever. Derek knew, I said, looking up at Gary. He knew exactly where the venue money came from. Gary's eyes had gone wet, and he wasn't hiding it anymore. I didn't know how deep it ran. I swear to you, Colleen, I thought that line of credit was just slow months. Just the store catching up. $18,500 isn't slow months, Gary. I know that now. He sat down at my table without being asked, which told me how far gone he was. I've run numbers every night this week. 64 for the cabin, 18,500 for the store, 3,500 for that wedding deposit Ashlyn told you about. 4,100 she called school money years back that never went near a school. He rubbed his face. It's over $113,000, Colleen, out of your money. Sitting under my roof for years, and I never once counted it up. Hearing him say the number out loud in his own kitchen voice landed different than seeing it on a bank statement. Why are you telling me this now? I said. Not 2 days ago? Not last week. Because Randall Calloway called me this afternoon, Gary said. After you turned down his money. He wanted to know if I could, quote, keep my wife under control before Friday. His mouth twisted. Man's worried about his own name, not ours, not Derek's, not Ashlyn's, his. That sounds like Randall. I got angry, Gary said. First time in years I got truly angry at somebody who wasn't you or Denise. And somewhere in the middle of that anger, I looked at my own son's name on a text thread, telling his mother not to mention it to the girl who raised him. His voice broke on the last words. You did raise yourself half the time, didn't you? We just kept the lights on. I didn't answer that. Some truths don't need agreeing with out loud. What do you want from me, Gary? I don't know. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, hunched over my kitchen table, windbreaker still zipped crooked. I guess I wanted you to know I didn't build this on purpose. I just never stopped it. That's its own kind of choice, I said, standing there while somebody else does the taking. He nodded slow, like the words cost him something to accept. Marjorie served me papers too? For the store? Ask her Friday, I said. I don't decide who gets served. He stood, folded the text thread back up, and set it on my counter instead of taking it with him. Keep it, he said. Might help your file. That surprised me more than anything Denise had said all week. Why would you hand me evidence against your own wife, Gary? He stopped at my door, hand on the frame. Because Earl trusted you with something, he said. And I think somewhere along the way I stopped trusting anybody, including my own family. Maybe it's time I started trusting the one Sorrel who never lied to me. He left before I could find words for that. I stood in my kitchen a long while after his truck pulled off, the text thread sitting on my counter under the light, Derek's own words staring back up at me. She's never asked once in 12 years. I photographed both pages and sent them straight to Marjorie. No message, just the images. My phone rang inside a minute. Where did you get this? She said. No hello? Gary brought it to me himself. Says Derek's phone stayed logged into a family cloud account. This is Derek acknowledging the venue money came from a business account he knew was compromised, Marjorie said, and I could hear her already typing somewhere. This isn't collateral damage anymore, Colleen. This puts your cousin inside the fraud, not just benefiting from it. Does that change Friday? It adds a name to a very short list of people who can't claim they didn't know, Marjorie said. Derek's set to inherit nothing directly from Earl's trust, but if he's found to have known and stayed silent while his mother committed fraud, that's relevant to a judge weighing intent versus ignorance for the whole family. A pause. I'm filing this as a supplemental exhibit tonight. Judge Holloway's clerk will have it before the courtroom opens. Gary's freaked out about the frozen line, I said. 18,500, locked as of this afternoon. That's the bank protecting itself, Marjorie said. Once fraud gets flagged on an account, they don't wait for a court order to freeze what's left. That's not us. That's just what happens when a hole gets big enough for someone else to notice. I looked at the 2 folded pages still sitting under my kitchen light. Marjorie, I said, how much more is there? Truly, before we walk in tomorrow. I don't know, she said, honest for once instead of careful. I've stopped trying to guess where the bottom is on this family. I just keep pulling until my hand comes up empty. And tomorrow? Tomorrow your hand doesn't come up empty, she said. Tomorrow it comes up full, in front of a judge, with every name attached to every dollar. Get some rest, Colleen. I mean it this time. I didn't sleep much. I sat at my table with the fireproof box open, Earl's ledger beside it, Gary's pages beside that, and went through the numbers one more time even though I already knew every one of them by heart. 64,000. 18,500. 3,500. 4,100. 180,000 sitting somewhere inside Cove Capital that Randall didn't want his own board asking about. Somewhere close to $270,000, all told, moving quiet through a family that used to hand me a cruise folder with somebody else's name where mine should have been. Morning came gray and cool, the kind of Carolina morning that can't decide if it wants rain. I put on the navy suit I wear for depositions, packed the fireproof box into a canvas tote, and drove to the courthouse on West Innis Street with the radio off, my hands steady on the wheel the whole way. Marjorie was waiting on the steps when I pulled in, a rolling case beside her, her coat buttoned against the wind. She looked at the tote in my hand and nodded once, like she was counting the box among her witnesses. You ready? She said. I've been ready for 12 years, I said. I just didn't have the room booked yet. Inside, the halls smelled like floor wax and old paper. A clerk pointed us toward courtroom 4, doors still closed, a small crowd already gathering outside them. I saw Denise first, in a gray dress, standing apart from Gary, not touching him. I saw Derek beside his father, jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. And past them, near the wall, a man in a charcoal suit I'd never seen in person, but recognized instantly from the voice on my phone 2 days before. Randall Calloway didn't nod. He didn't look away either. He just watched me walk past him toward the doors, like a man watching a bill finally come due. Marjorie's hand found my elbow, light, steadying. "Whatever happens in there," she said, "you did the part that mattered already. You kept the receipts." The bailiff called the docket. The doors opened. Courtroom 4 smelled like lemon polish and old carpet. Rows of hard benches, a flag in the corner, a clock ticking above the judge's bench. Marjorie set her rolling case down at our table and started pulling files, sorted, tabbed, ready. I set the canvas tote beside her case. The fireproof box went on the table between us, plain and gray, like it belonged there. All rise. Judge Holloway walked in fast, black robe swinging, reading glasses already on. She sat, looked out over the room, and didn't smile at anybody. "This is a probate matter," she said. "Estate of Earl Prentice. I understand there's also a related fraud referral from the Rowan County Register of Deeds and a motion to intervene from counsel representing Cove Capital." She looked toward the back. "Mr. Whitfield, that's you." A man in a charcoal suit stood. Not Randall, his lawyer. "Yes, Your Honor. We're asking for limited standing, given the financial exposure to my client." "Noted. Sit down for now." She turned to our table. "Ms. Ashcroft, you're representing the petitioner." "I am, Your Honor. Colleen Marsh, granddaughter of the decedent and named beneficiary under the trust. And you have witnesses." "3, Marjorie said. "Sharon Betts, notary public, Gary Sorrell, and Colleen Marsh herself." Denise sat 2 rows back with Derek, both of them staring straight ahead like the bench itself might catch fire. Gary sat 1 row up from them, alone, windbreaker traded for a collared shirt that looked borrowed. "Call your first witness," the judge said. Sharon Betts walked up looking like she hadn't slept. Late 50s, cardigan buttoned wrong, hands shaking a little as she took the oath. Marjorie stood. "Mrs. Betts, you notarized a deed transfer for a cabin property on High Rock Lake 6 weeks ago. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Whose signature did you notarize?" "Denise Sorrell's." "As power of attorney for Earl Prentice, did you verify that power of attorney was valid?" Sharon's mouth trembled. "She told me it was on file at the courthouse. I didn't check myself." "Was it?" "No," Sharon said. "I found out later. There wasn't one." A murmur ran through the benches. Denise didn't move. "Who asked you to notarize the deed?" Marjorie asked. "Denise. She said it was routine. Family business." Sharon looked at her hands. "I've known her 20 years. I trusted her word." "Thank you," Marjorie said. Nothing further. Whitfield stood for cross, but the judge waved him down. "Save it, counsel, this isn't your witness yet." She looked at Sharon. "You may step down." Gary went next. He walked slower than I'd ever seen him walk, sat in the box, folded his hands. "Mr. Sorrell," Marjorie said, "you operate Sorrell's Hardware on Innis Street." "I do. Your business line of credit was frozen yesterday afternoon by the bank's compliance office. Do you know why? They said there was a fraud flag on withdrawals going back years. Were you aware of those withdrawals?" Gary's jaw worked. "Not all of them. Not at first." "Did your wife ever tell you where the money for the cabin sale went?" "She told me it was covering the store," Gary said. "I didn't ask enough questions. I know that now." Did your son Derek know the venue deposit for his wedding came from that same line of credit? Gary's eyes flicked to Derek in the gallery, just once. Yes, he said. I have a text thread that shows he knew. The room went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when something true just landed in it. Nothing further, Marjorie said. I took the stand last. The oath felt lighter in my mouth than I expected, like something I'd been rehearsing without knowing it. Ms. Marsh, Marjorie said, how long have you lived apart from the Sorrel household? 12 years, since I turned 18. During that time, did the county continue mailing you disbursement notices related to Earl Prentice's trust? Every year, I said. I kept everyone in a fireproof box. Why keep them if you weren't managing the trust? Habit, I said. I'm a claims investigator. I don't throw away paper that has my name on it. A few people in the gallery almost laughed. The judge didn't. Did those disbursement notices match what Earl told you the trust contained? No, I said. 12 years of certified mail records show withdrawals I was never told about. Over $113,000, not counting the cabin sale. And the cabin sale? $64,000, I said. Sold 9 days before this hearing, notarized without a valid power of attorney, to cover the same line of credit that funded a wedding deposit and years of what my aunt called school money. Whitfield stood. Your Honor, my client's $400,000 position in Sorrel's Hardware has nothing to do with a decedent's cabin. Sit down, Mr. Whitfield, Judge Holloway said, not unkindly. You'll get your turn. Right now, I'm hearing whether a woman's trust got quietly emptied for 12 years. She looked at me. Ms. Marsh, did your grandfather ever tell you he suspected something was wrong? He called me 5 weeks before he died, I said. Told me there was something coming for my birthday. Told me not to let anyone talk me out of opening it. And what came? A letter, I said, delivered on a cruise ship, day 3 at sea, on my 30th birthday, from Marjorie's office. The judge looked at Marjorie. I take it that letter is why we're all here. It's part of why, Your Honor, Marjorie said. The rest is in that box. Judge Holloway looked at the fireproof box sitting on our table like it was the only honest thing in the room. Ms. Ashcroft, she said, I think it's time you opened it. Marjorie glanced at me. I nodded. She lifted the lid. My aunt stood in our kitchen with the family cruise folder in her hand once. That was weeks ago now. In courtroom 4, it was different paper. Marjorie lifted the lid on the fireproof box. Inside sat a stack of yellowed envelopes, banded together, and a single spiral ledger with Earl's handwriting on the cover. Prentice Trust, Personal Log. Your Honor, Marjorie said, this is the decedent's own accounting, kept separately from the trust's official records. How do we know it's his? Judge Holloway said. His attorney of record is standing in front of you, Marjorie said. I watched him write in it, twice a year, every year for the last 6. She opened to the final page. Earl Prentice wrote this entry 8 weeks before he passed, she said. I'll read it as written. The room went still. Even the clock stopped mattering. I know what's been taken and from who. I've matched every withdrawal against Colleen's birthday. Denise thinks I never noticed the pattern. I noticed everything. If I die before I fix this the right way, the trust document does it for me. Denise's hand went to her collarbone like she could hold something in. Marjorie set the ledger down and picked up a single typed page. This is Section 12 of the trust, she said. The forfeiture clause. Whitfield half rose. The judge's glance sat him back down. Read it, Judge Holloway said. Any trustee or advancement recipient found to have received undisclosed distributions from trust principal without documented consent of the named beneficiary forfeits all claim to the residual estate, said residual passing in full to the remaining named beneficiary. Marjorie looked up. Denise Sorrel is named trustee on this document, she said. Colleen Marsh is the sole remaining named beneficiary. Nobody in the gallery moved. Your Honor, Whitfield said, standing again, this is a private drafting matter between family members. My client's position in Sorrell's Hardware predates any of this. Your client's $400,000 sits in a business that received fraud-flagged funds, Judge Holloway said. Sit down, Mr. Whitfield. Second time. He sat. The judge turned to Denise. Mrs. Sorrell, she said, do you dispute the ledger's dates? Denise's mouth opened. Nothing came out at first. I managed my father's money the way he asked me to, she finally said. Did he ask you to withdraw $64,000 for a cabin sale 9 days ago? He's not here to say otherwise. He wrote it down instead, the judge said. That tends to work just as well. Derek stood up in the gallery, red to his ears. This is insane. My mother raised her, fed her, clothed her, put a roof over her head for 12 years. Sit down, young man, the judge said. This isn't your hearing. She was never even ours to raise, Denise said, sharp, cracking. She was never really our real family, just the one we… She stopped herself too late. The whole room heard it land twice. I remember that line, I said, quiet, from my seat. You said it in our kitchen over a cruise folder. Denise's face went pale. Never really our real family, I said again. Just the one you raised? Funny thing about raising somebody, Denise. Eventually they learn to read. Marjorie let that sit a second before turning back to the bench. Your Honor, given the ledger, the notarized deed without valid power of attorney, and the text evidence showing knowledge by Derek Sorrell, we're asking the court to void the cabin sale, restore the property to the estate, and rule the residual estate passes to Colleen Marsh, per the forfeiture clause. Judge Holloway took off her reading glasses. Mr. Whitfield, she said, does your client wish to be heard before I rule? Randall Calloway stood himself this time, buttoning his jacket, voice smooth even now. Your Honor, Cove Capital is withdrawing its position in Sorrell's Hardware, effective today. We were assured a clean balance sheet. We did not get one. Noted, the judge said. Sit. He did. Derek's face went from red to something closer to gray. Judge Holloway looked out over the room, at Denise, at Gary, at Derek, at me. I find the cabin transfer void for lack of valid authority, she said. Title reverts to the estate immediately. I find the withdrawals documented in Exhibit C constitute undisclosed advancements under Section 12. Denise Sorrell forfeits any claim to residual trust assets. The residual estate, including the High Rock Lake property and remaining trust funds, passes in full to Colleen Marsh, effective today. She set the gavel down light, no drama in it. I'm also referring the notarization irregularity and the bank fraud flags to the district attorney's office for review, she said. That's a separate matter from probate, but it doesn't disappear because we're done here. Denise didn't cry. She just sat very still, staring at the ledger like it might close itself if she waited long enough. Gary reached over and put a hand on her arm. She let him, barely. Derek walked out first, phone already in his hand, texting somebody, probably Ashlyn, probably her father. Randall followed a minute later, unhurried, like a man who'd already moved on to his next quarter. I stayed in my seat until the room thinned out. Marjorie packed her files slower than she needed to, giving me room. You did good in there, she said. Steady the whole way through. I don't raise my voice, I said. I raise the file. You raised more than a file today, she said. You raised 12 years. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the gray morning had burned off into thin sun. Gary caught up to us at the bottom, alone now, Denise still somewhere inside with a clerk going over paperwork. Colleen, he said. I turned. The store, he said. Whatever happens with the loan. I want you to know none of it was ever about you being less than Derek. That was Denise's math. Never mine. I know that now, Gary, I said. I didn't always. Cabin's yours, he said. Truly yours. I hope you go sit on that dock and don't think about any of us for a good long while. I plan to, I said. He nodded, turned, and walked toward the parking lot, slow, windbreaker gone, just a collared shirt and a man carrying a weight I didn't have to carry anymore. Marjorie touched my elbow again. Come on, she said. Let's get you the deed. The Register of Deeds office sat 2 blocks from the courthouse, in a squat brick building with a flag out front. Marjorie walked in like she owned the place. Maybe, by now, she basically did. A clerk named Pauline pulled up the file before Marjorie even finished spelling my last name. I saw this come through as a fraud referral yesterday, she said. Wondered when somebody'd walk in about it. Today's the day, Marjorie said. Pauline printed the order voiding the cabin sale, stamped it, then pulled a second form. New deed goes in your name, Ms. Marsh, sole owner, High Rock Lake, parcel 211. My hand shook a little signing it, not from doubt, just from 12 years of paperwork finally landing somewhere true. That's it? I said. That's it, Pauline said. Recorded, dated, done. Congratulations on the property. Marjorie folded the copy into her case like it was nothing new to her, though I caught the small smile she didn't bother hiding. Feels strange, I said, out on the sidewalk. Something this big taking 10 minutes. The 10 minutes was the easy part, Marjorie said. You did the 12 years. My phone buzzed before we reached the car. A text from a number I didn't have saved. I opened it anyway. This is Ashlyn. Derek told me everything got voided in court today. Is it true my father pulled Cove Capital's money out of the hardware store? I stared at it a second. Marjorie glanced over my shoulder, didn't say anything, just waited. I typed back 4 words. You should ask Derek. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He's not answering. Neither is my father. I put the phone in my bag. Whatever came next for Ashlyn Calloway wasn't mine to manage. I'd spent enough years managing other people's messes for free. You okay? Marjorie asked. I don't know Ashlyn, I said. Not really. We met twice at things I wasn't invited to enjoy. Doesn't mean you can't feel for her. I can feel for her, I said. I just can't fix her wedding. Nobody fixed mine, and I never had one to lose. Marjorie let that sit, then unlocked her car. Get in. I'll drive you out to the lake. The road to High Rock Lake ran the way it always had, past the Food Lion, past the volunteer fire station, past a church sign that still said "Pray for Our Nation" in red plastic letters. 20 minutes of pine trees leaning over 2-lane blacktop, the kind of road I'd ridden 100 times as a kid in the back of Earl's truck, window down, dog in my lap. Marjorie turned onto the gravel drive without needing directions. Earl brought me out here twice, she said. Once to sign the trust, once just to fish. Did he catch anything? Nothing worth cleaning, she said. He didn't care. Said the point was sitting still long enough to hear yourself think. The cabin came into view through the trees, gray board siding, green shutters, a chimney leaning very slightly the way it always had. A padlock hung on the door, new, shiny, not one I recognized. That's not the estate's lock, Marjorie said, frowning. I stepped closer. A yellow tag hung from the hasp, laminated, county seal stamped on it. Notice of reversal. Property returned to estate of Earl Prentice pending transfer. Underneath, in smaller print, a case number and a date. Fast, I said. Judge Holloway doesn't like sitting on paperwork, Marjorie said. Neither do I. I had a key in my bag, an old one Earl gave me years back for emergencies that never came. It didn't fit the new lock. Marjorie pulled a bolt cutter from her trunk like she'd expected exactly this. You carry that around? I carry a lot of things, she said, snapping the lock in one clean motion. Comes with representing people whose families like locks. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar and dust and a little bit like Earl's aftershave, faint, stubborn, refusing to leave the walls. A recliner sat by the window, facing the water, a folded blanket over one arm exactly the way he always left it. A coffee mug still sat on the side table, rings dried into its bottom. I picked it up, turned it over. World's okayest fisherman. I'd bought him that mug at a gas station when I was 16, as a joke. He'd used it every single day since. He never got rid of it, I said. He never got rid of anything that mattered, Marjorie said, including you. I set the mug down carefully, like it might still break something if I wasn't gentle. Out the window, the lake sat flat and gray-blue, a heron picking its way along the shallows near the dock. The same dock. The same water. 12 years since I'd sat on those boards with my feet in the lake, and it had just been waiting, the whole time, patient as a held breath. I should call the bank, I said, find out what's actually happening with Gary's loan. Already ahead of you, Marjorie said, phone already out. She dialed, waited, spoke a few clipped sentences to someone on the other end, then hung up. Line of credits frozen pending review. Full audit ordered. Whatever's left of that $400,000 from Cove Capital, it's sitting in escrow until somebody proves where it actually is. And the store? Open today, she said. Might not be open next month. Not my problem, and honestly, not really yours either anymore. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Denise. I almost didn't look. Then I did. I know you probably hate me. I just want you to know the cabin was never about hating you. It was about surviving. Gary's business, Derek's future. I thought I'd fix it before you ever noticed. I read it twice. Marjorie watched my face, not the screen. She's not wrong that she thought she'd fix it, I said. She's just wrong about who was supposed to pay for the fixing. You going to answer? I thought about it. Standing in Earl's cabin with his mug still on the table and his blanket still on the chair. 12 years of birthday envelopes I never got to open. $64,000 sold out from under me 9 days before a hearing. A wedding funded off a name that wasn't mine. Never really our real family, she'd said once in a kitchen that used to be my whole world. I typed one line back. I paid for surviving too, Denise. I just didn't send anyone a bill. I put the phone away and didn't look at it again that afternoon. Marjorie walked out to the porch, giving me room the way she seemed to know how to do without being asked. I stood alone in the front room a minute longer, running my hand along the back of Earl's recliner, feeling the worn spot where his head used to rest. You said something coming for my birthday, I said, out loud, to no one, to him. Took its sweet time getting here. Outside, the heron lifted off the shallows, wings slow and wide, and settled again farther down the bank like it had somewhere else to be, but wasn't in any hurry to get there. I walked out onto the porch and sat down on the top step beside Marjorie, the boards cool under me, the lake stretching out flat and quiet past the dock. What happens now? I asked. Now, Marjorie said, you get to decide what a family actually looks like when nobody's grading you for it. Marjorie drove me back into town before the light went orange over the trees. She dropped me at my apartment, told me to sleep if I could, and said she'd call in the morning with next steps on the audit. I told her I would. I didn't, not really. I lay on my couch with Earl's mug sitting on my counter, still unwashed, and stared at the ceiling until 2 a.m. My phone buzzed at 7 the next day. Marjorie again. DA's office opened a file. She said, no hello first, formal this time. Bank fraud, notary fraud, the works. On Denise? On Denise. Possibly the notary too, if she signed off knowing the power of attorney was fake. That part's not settled yet. What happens to her? Depends what they find, Marjorie said. Could be a fine and probation if she cooperates. Could be worse if she doesn't. Not my case anymore, honestly. I just work probate. You worked a lot more than probate yesterday, I said. That's what people keep telling me, she said, and I could hear her almost smiling. Go eat something, Colleen. You look thin on the phone. You can't see me on the phone. I could hear it, she said, and hung up before I could argue. I made eggs I didn't finish and sat at my kitchen table with the fireproof box in front of me, the one that had started all of it. I opened it one more time, just to look. The certified mail slips were still in there, 12 years of them, yellowed at the edges. I didn't need them anymore. The judge had already ruled, but I wasn't ready to put them away yet either. My phone buzzed again around noon. Not Marjorie this time. Gary. Colleen, he said when I picked up. Got a minute? For you, sure. Store's closing, he said. Flat, no drama in it, like a man reading a weather report about somebody else's town. Bank called this morning. Called the loan due in full given the fraud flags. We can't cover it. I'm sorry, Gary, and I meant it, even now. Don't be, he said. I built that business on my own money for 11 years before Denise ever touched a dime that wasn't ours. Should have kept it that way. What'll you do? Sell the equipment. Pay what we can. Get a job somewhere that isn't mine to lose. He paused. Derek's wedding's off, by the way. Figured you'd hear it somewhere, might as well hear it from me. Ashlyn called it off? Her father did, technically. Told Derek a man who marries into fraud money doesn't marry into the Calloway name. Ashlyn didn't fight him on it too hard, from what Derek says. I sat with that a second. 12 years of being told I wasn't real family, and the one who was supposed to be real, the golden one, the one with the future built for him, had lost his future in the space of one court date. I'm not glad about that, I said. Mostly true. I believe you, Gary said. You never wanted him to lose anything. You just wanted to stop losing yourself. Yeah, I said. That's exactly it. I should let you go, he said. Just wanted you to hear it from somebody who isn't going to sugarcoat it into something it's not. Thank you, Gary. Take care of that cabin, he said. Earl loved that place more than he loved most people, present company excluded. He hung up before I could answer that one either. Seemed to run in the family, quick exits before I could get a word back. I drove out to High Rock Lake again 2 days later, this time on my own, no Marjorie, no bolt cutters needed since the new lock was already mine. The gravel crunched under my tires the same way it had my whole childhood. The heron was gone this time, but the water sat just as still, catching the afternoon light in long silver strips. I let myself in and stood in the front room a while, looking at things I hadn't really looked at the day before, too busy with locks and phones and Denise's texts. A shelf of Earl's fishing lures, a photograph of him and Denise on the dock, young, maybe 30 years back, before any of this. A second photograph, smaller, tucked behind the first one like it hadn't wanted to be found. Me, age 6, sitting on his lap in that same recliner, gap-toothed, grinning. I hadn't remembered that photo existing. I hadn't remembered him keeping it out where he could see it every day. My phone buzzed. Denise, again. The DA called. Wants to meet with my lawyer next week. I don't know what's going to happen to me, Colleen. I looked at that a long moment, the photo of 6-year-old me still in my other hand. I don't know either, I wrote back. That's not mine to fix. I know, I just don't have anyone else to say it to. That one almost got me. Almost. I thought about Earl's ledger, his careful little notes, 6 years of watching the pattern and saying nothing to my face, letting the paperwork say it for him instead. I thought about how long a person can carry a truth before they finally let it out somewhere safe. Get a good lawyer, I wrote. Tell the truth. That's the only thing that ever actually helps, in my experience. She didn't answer after that. I put the phone face down on the recliner's arm and went out to the dock instead. Sat down on the boards the way I used to, feet not quite reaching the water anymore since I'd grown some since I was a kid. The letter was still in my bag, the one from the cruise, the one that started all of this. I hadn't been able to put it away yet, either. I pulled it out and read Earl's handwriting one more time, slower this time, without a courtroom waiting on the other side of it. Something's coming for your birthday. Don't let anyone talk you out of opening it. I hadn't. Not for one single day. Behind me, my phone buzzed one more time. Marjorie. Audit's back. You're going to want to sit down for this one. The call came through before I made it back to the truck. Marjorie didn't wait for me to say hello. Sit down, she said. I mean it. I'm standing in a gravel driveway, Marjorie. Then lean on something. She let out a breath. Total drained from Earl's trust, matched against the county's certified mail records, going back 12 years. $197,340. I didn't say anything for a second. That's almost 200 grand, she said. Not 64. 64 was just the last withdrawal, the store loan. What was the rest? Some of it small. A truck down payment for Derek in year 2. Braces. A trip to Myrtle Beach billed as a family expense. But $18,500 of it went out 14 months ago. Engagement ring. Deposit on a venue. Ashlyn's ring, I said. Ashlyn's ring, Marjorie said. Bought with money that had your name on the paperwork the whole time. I stood there in the driveway with the lake behind me, catching the last orange light, and thought about how many envelopes I'd never opened because Denise told me not to bother. There's more, Marjorie said. Cove Capital's $400,000, fully withdrawn as of yesterday. Randall Calloway's lawyer called the bank himself. Wanted it on record that he pulled it before any of this broke, not after. Convenient timing. Very, Marjorie said. Man like that doesn't wait to see how a scandal lands. He just leaves before it does. So the store's done. The wedding's done. The loan's done. Everything's done, Marjorie said. Except the DA's file. That one's just getting started. Arraignment's Thursday. You don't have to go. I want to go. Figured you'd say that. The Rowan County Courthouse looked different on a Thursday morning than it had the day I stood on its steps with Marjorie. Fewer people. Same gray stone, same flag hanging still in no wind at all. I sat in the third row of the gallery, 5 seats from anyone. Marjorie sat beside me, legal pad closed on her lap for once. They brought Denise in through a side door. She wore a blue blouse I recognized, one she used to save for church. Her hands were folded in front of her like she was praying at a stove instead of standing in front of a judge. She looked for me before she looked at anyone else, found me in the third row. Didn't smile, didn't cry either. Denise Marie Sorrell, the clerk read, you are charged with financial exploitation of a trust beneficiary and notary fraud in the 2nd degree. Denise's lawyer stood next to her, said something quiet. She nodded. How does your client plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, the lawyer said, pending review of the evidence. The judge set bond, set a court date 2 months out, and that was it. 15 minutes for 12 years. On her way out, flanked by her lawyer, Denise slowed near our row. A bailiff didn't stop her, not yet, not past the rail. I used to tell myself it was borrowing, she said, quiet, just to me. I really believed that some years. I know, I said. I don't expect you to forgive it. I don't, I said, but I'm not carrying it either, not anymore. She nodded once, like that was the fairest answer she was going to get, and let the bailiff walk her on. I drove past the hardware store on my way out of town, the one on Main Street with sorrels painted across the front in letters Gary had repainted himself every few years. A hand-lettered sign hung in the window now. Closing sale. Everything must go. Gary stood behind the counter, ringing up a man buying a box of nails and a shop light, like it was any other Tuesday. He caught my eye through the glass, lifted 2 fingers off the counter in something between a wave and a salute. I lifted mine back and kept driving. My phone buzzed at a red light. A text from a number I now had saved as Ashlyn. I heard about the arraignment. I'm sorry I ever asked you to fix anything. It wasn't fair. I typed back 4 words, same as before, because they were still true. You didn't owe me fair. Derek moved to Charlotte, she added. Selling insurance, I think. We don't talk. I set the phone in the cup holder and didn't answer that part. Some threads you just let go slack instead of cutting. Derek wasn't my business to track anymore, wherever he landed. Marjorie called again that evening, this time with something almost like warmth in her voice. Restitution order's going to come with the plea, whatever it ends up being, she said. Judge Holloway doesn't play games with elder trust cases. You'll see some of that money back. Not all of it. But some. How much is some? Depends what she's got left to give. Could be years of payments. Could be property she has to sell. Marjorie paused. You don't have to think about the number tonight. I'm not, I said, and meant it more than I expected to. Go sit somewhere quiet, she said. You've earned about a decade of that. I told her I would. This time, I actually did. The plea hearing landed in September, right on the court date Marjorie had told me back in July. I went alone this time. Didn't need her hand on my arm to get through the doors anymore. Denise's lawyer had worked out a deal. Guilty plea on the exploitation charge. The notary fraud charge got dropped in exchange, since the notary herself turned out to be more useful as a witness than a co-defendant. She said Denise had told her the paperwork was routine. Said she never saw Earl's actual signature page, just initialed where she was told. Court finds the plea knowing and voluntary, the judge said. He looked at Denise over his glasses. Restitution is ordered in full. $197,340, payable to the estate of Earl Prentice, care of the beneficiary. Me. That was me now. Given defendant's cooperation and lack of prior record, he went on, sentence is 5 years probation, no active time, contingent on restitution payments remaining current. Denise didn't cry. I'd half expected her to. She just nodded, the way you nod at a doctor telling you a diagnosis you already suspected. Outside on the courthouse steps, Gary was waiting. He'd aged since I'd seen him at the closing sale, more gray at the temples than I remembered. She's going to pay it back in installments, he said, like I hadn't just heard the number read out loud. $2,000 a month, near enough. Took out a second job at the feed store in Rockwell. I know, Gary. I was standing right there. Right. He looked at his shoes. 98 years at that rate, if she lives that long. There's more coming from the sale of some things, I said. The equipment auction. Any land she's got left in her name. Not much land left, he said. Turns out. He almost smiled, and it wasn't a happy one. Funny thing watching your whole life get itemized on a spreadsheet. I know exactly how that feels, I said. Funny's not the word I'd use. He had the decency to look ashamed at that. Store's fully closed now, he said. Auction cleared $41,000 on the equipment. Went to the bank first. Rest goes toward what's left on the note. You keeping the building? Selling that too. Fella from Kannapolis wants to put a vape shop in it. He shook his head slow, like the world had personally insulted him. 40 years of Sorrell's hardware. Ends up a vape shop. I didn't say anything to that. Some things don't need a response, just a witness. Derek called me last week, he added. From Charlotte. Selling insurance, like I said. Asked how you were doing. What did you tell him? Told him I didn't rightly know. Told him he could ask you himself if he wanted to know that bad. Did he? No, Gary said. Guess he didn't want to know that bad. I left him standing on the courthouse steps and drove out toward High Rock Lake instead of home. Didn't plan it. My hands just took the turn at the light on Jake Alexander Boulevard like they'd been waiting for an excuse. The gravel driveway had weeds coming up through it now, little green fists pushing between the stones. I made a note to get somebody out to clear that. My driveway. My weeds now, if I wanted them. Marjorie's car was already there when I pulled in. She was sitting on the porch steps with a folder in her lap, the way she always seemed to be sitting somewhere with a folder. "You following me now?" I asked. "I called your apartment first," she said. "Your neighbor said you'd gone out toward the lake." Wasn't hard to guess the rest. She patted the step beside her. "Final accounting's ready. Figured you'd want to see it somewhere quiet instead of my office." I sat down. The lake was doing its late afternoon thing, going gold at the edges where the sun hit it low. "Give me the short version," I said. "Residual estate, after restitution's fully accounted and the audit closed out, comes to just over $310,000, Marjorie said. Cabins appraised at $140 of that, structure and the 2 acres. Rest is investments Earl never touched. Bonds mostly, boring, safe, exactly like him. And it's mine." "All of it," she said. "Clean title on the cabin, effective as of last week. County voided Denise's sale filing entirely since it was built on a forged authority, like it never happened." I looked out at the water a long minute. "He really thought of everything," I said. 12 years of watching me, keeping his ledger, saying nothing. "He wasn't a man for saying things," Marjorie said. "He was a man for writing things down and letting them speak later when it'd matter more. Would have been nice to hear it from him while he was alive." "Would it?" Marjorie said, "and there wasn't any judgment in it. Or would you have argued with him? Told him not to do it? That you didn't need it? That it'd cause a war he wasn't going to be around to referee?" I thought about it honestly. "Probably that," I admitted. "I'd have told him to leave it alone." "He knew that too," she said. "That's why he waited for the birthday. Man wasn't going to give you a chance to talk him out of the one thing he actually got right." I laughed, short, more air than sound. "He said that. Almost exactly that. Don't let anyone talk you out of opening it." "Sounds like Earl," Marjorie said. We sat there while the sun kept sliding, the water turning from gold to something closer to copper. "There's one more thing in the folder," Marjorie said, and handed it over. "Not legal. Just something I found going through his papers with the bank. Thought you should have it before I file the rest away." It was a single sheet, handwriting shakier than the ledger's neat columns, dated 8 months before he died. "If Colleen ever asks why I waited so long to fix this, tell her I wasn't waiting on proof. I had proof for years. I was waiting on her to be ready to use it without breaking herself doing it." I read it twice, folded it along the crease that was already there, and put it in my bag next to the letter that had started all of it. "You okay?" Marjorie asked. "Getting there," I said. "Slower than I'd like, faster than I expected." She stood, brushed off the back of her slacks, and looked down at me, still sitting on the step. "What are you going to do with all this?" she asked. "The cabin, the money, the rest of your life, now that nobody's grading you on it." I looked out at the dock, weathered gray, one board coming loose at the far end that I'd need to fix before winter. "I've got an idea," I said. "Give me a few weeks to make it real instead of just an idea." "I like the sound of that already," Marjorie said, and left me there with the lake and the letter and a driveway full of weeds that were finally all mine to deal with. Marjorie's Buick was still in the driveway 3 weeks later when a truck from Salisbury Dock and Deck pulled in behind it. I'd called them myself. Time to fix that loose board before winter got here. The 2 guys worked while Marjorie and I sat on the porch with coffee going cold in our hands. She had a new folder, thinner than the old ones. I liked that. "You said you had an idea," she said. "Weeks ago, on these very steps." "I did. I set my mug down. I want to set up a fund, small one, for people going through what I went through." She raised an eyebrow. "Be specific. I'm a lawyer. Vague makes me nervous. Trust beneficiaries who suspect a family member's been skimming, people who can't afford to hire someone like you to find out. I looked out at the water. Money for a forensic accountant, money for a lawyer, for the first consultation, so it's not just talk. You want to fund the thing that saved you. I want to fund the thing that would have saved me faster, I said. If I'd had it at 24 instead of 30. Marjorie wrote something down. How much are you putting in? 40,000 to start. Out of the residual. I watched one of the dock guys pull the rotted board free with a crowbar, easy, like it had been waiting years to let go. Earl's money built it. Feels right it keeps building something. I can draft the trust documents by next week, Marjorie said. You'll want a board. Not just you deciding who gets what. You. Maybe Gary, if he'll do it. Marjorie's pen stopped. Gary Sorrell. He didn't take a dime that wasn't handed to him, I said. He just didn't ask enough questions. That's not the same as Denise. I've been thinking about that a lot. That's generous. It's not generous, I said. It's accurate. There's a difference. She let that sit, then wrote his name down anyway. My phone buzzed on the porch rail. Unknown number, Salisbury area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me pick up. Is this Colleen Marsh? A woman's voice, younger than mine, careful like she'd rehearsed the sentence. Speaking. My name's Renee Ferguson. I got your number from a woman at the courthouse. Said you might understand my situation. A pause. My stepfather manages my inheritance. Has for 6 years. I asked to see the statements last month and he told me not to worry my pretty head about it. I felt my spine go straight the way it used to at my desk, reviewing a file that didn't add up. How old were you when the trust was set up? I asked. 19. How old are you now? 25. Do you have a copy of the original trust document? No. He keeps everything at his office. Get one, I said. You're entitled to it. Ask in writing, certified mail, so there's a paper trail. And Renee, don't sign anything he hands you without reading every line first. That's it? She said. That's what people do? That's step 1, I said. There's a fund starting up. It'll cover a forensic accountant to go through what he gives you. You won't be doing this with nothing behind you. She was quiet a second. Somebody told me you went through something like this. Something like it, I said. Worse in some ways, better in others. Did it work out? For you? I looked at the dock, half fixed. One new board, pale against the gray of the old ones. It's working out. Slower than I wanted. Okay, Renee said, and her voice had steadied some. Okay. Thank you. I gave her Marjorie's office number and hung up. Marjorie was watching me over her coffee. Fund's not even drafted yet, she said, and it's already got a first case. Guess word travels. Guess it does. She closed her folder. You know this is going to keep happening. Once people hear an auditor with a trust fund is out here answering her phone. I'm counting on it, I said. At my job, the change came smaller and slower, the way real changes to a big system always do. I brought the Sorrell file to my supervisor, Deb, not to brag on it, just because policy said flagged cases over a certain dollar threshold got reviewed for pattern. Denise's file qualified twice over. Deb read it at her desk while I stood there. She got to the part about the notary and looked up. 12 years, she said, and it went through our system every single time. Certified mail confirmations. Nobody flagged the pattern. Because nobody was matching disbursement requests against a second signer's actual location, I said. The notary was 30 miles from where the withdrawals said she was. Deb tapped her pen against the desk for a while. I'm bringing this to the state office. We ought to have an automatic flag when the same notary clears withdrawals for the same trust more than a certain number of times a year. How many is the trigger? I don't know yet. 4? 5? She wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to her monitor, the way she did with things she meant to actually do something about. You should write up the methodology. How you caught it. Might end up training material. I didn't catch it, I said. My grandfather did. I just read what he left. Write it up anyway, Deb said. Doesn't matter who started it. Matters that it gets used. 6 weeks after that, a woman 2 counties over got a letter from her bank flagging an irregular notary pattern on her father's trust, the same week she'd started to wonder on her own. I only heard about it secondhand, through Marjorie, through a chain of people helping people. I never learned her name. Didn't need to. The cabin took the whole fall to feel like mine instead of a place I was visiting. I put my own coffee mug in the cupboard next to Earl's chipped ones instead of taking his down. Left the 2 photographs on the shelf exactly where they'd always been, dock and recliner, young Earl and young me. Denise's first restitution payment came through in October, $2,000, routed through Marjorie's office straight into the new fund instead of my own account. I told Marjorie to set it up that way before the first check ever cleared. You don't want any of it for yourself? She'd asked. I've got the cabin, I've got the lake. That's already more than I had in July, I said. Let her money go towards somebody who needs it faster than I did. Derek never called. Ashlyn sent one more text near Thanksgiving, just a photo of a small apartment in Charlotte and the words starting over, I guess. I didn't answer that one. Some doors you leave unlocked without walking back through them. Gary took the seat on the funds board. Showed up to the first meeting in his old Sorrells hardware ball cap, faded now, and didn't say much, just listened hard and asked good questions about where the accountant's fee went. I figured that was about right. For him. A quiet correction, not a big one. Big. The line Denise said in our kitchen came back to me sometimes, standing at the sink, driving Innis Street past the old house. Never really our real family, only the one we raised. I used to hear it and go cold. Now I just heard a woman who was scared of being caught, reaching for the cruelest sentence in the room because it was easier than the true one. Real family doesn't check the mail before it lets you see it. The evening the last of the dock boards went in, I walked out barefoot to test them, the wood still smelling of fresh-cut pine under the old gray boards on either side. The sun was going down orange over High Rock Lake, same as it had that first evening back in July. Earl's letter was still in my jacket pocket, worn soft at the folds now from being carried so long. I sat down at the very end of the dock, feet finally reaching the water. The letter stayed folded in my pocket, and the lake went quiet gold around me.